What's up everybody, Chris here with Salty Island, and as we approach 10th edition, we're going to keep you entertained with a custom boarding patrol scenario. Aboard an Adeptus Mechanicus explorer ship, Tech Priest Marlium becomes separated in a warp storm from the rest of his fleet. Riding the currents of the warp, the ship was ejected back into real space amid the wrecked remains of a great space battle. At first, it appeared that there were no remaining survivors amongst the ruins, but soon the sounds of heavy impacts against the ship's hull alerted them otherwise. Ork survivors had lain in wait amongst the ruins for any sign of a working ship, and with the arrival of the lone Admech vessel, they had launched themselves in the remaining pods to attempt to board and commandeer this vessel. We aren't wasting any time, so here's the forces for today's battle. The defenders are the Admech, using Forge World Metallica rules led by the Dominus with the Cogitator Override Node Warlord trait. This lets him activate hatchways within 9 inches of him. Supporting him are 20 Skitarii Rangers, split up into 4 groups of 5 with a various mix of weapons, and then lastly 3 Cataphron Destroyers, all grav cannons and phosphor blasters. And the attackers are the Orks, led by a Death Skull's war boss with the Might is Right Warlord trait. This gives him +1 strength and +1 attacks. The Ork forces are split up into 3 waves corresponding with their respective clan, though all of the forces in today's game will be using the Death Skull's rule in recognition of their boss. For the first wave, we get 9 Bad Moon Shooter Boys, led by a Knob. In the second wave, 9 Choppa Slugga Boys, led by a Knob, and accompanied by a Runt Herder. And in the third and final wave, we get a mix of Shooters and Choppa Boys with a Knob, and a 5-man Knob squad, and lastly the war boss, Mole Smasher himself. All of the weapons in today's game is what you see, what you get, so let's get straight to the scenario. This is a custom scenario in which the Admech need to defend the ship and sweep the halls clear of the Ork invaders. In addition, the Admech have a special scenario objective in the form of the command console sitting atop the upper platform. If any Admech unit ends their movement next to the console, they can perform the rites of activation to awaken an additional hidden unit that can support them in the battle. The Orks, on the other hand, need to sweep the Admech from the area so they can establish a landing zone for the rest of the Ork forces. The Orks consist of the remains of 3 Ork Clans, with each clan arriving from the Ork table edge at the start of their respective turns. First, the Bad Moons on turn 1, then the Evil Sons will arrive on turn 2, and lastly the Death Skulls with the War Boss on turn 3. The game will simply last until there is a clear winner. The Admech have deployed on the left side of the board, ready to meet the invaders, with the Orks moving on to the table on the 2 available openings on the right. So let's go ahead and get to turn 1. The Orks, as the attackers, get the first turn as the assault craft of the Bad Moons clan rush forward and the first wave of attackers appears. 9 Ork Shooter Boys and 1 Knob with a Power Claw split up into 2 units of 5. Up top, the Orks go into Overwatch with the big shooter ready to open fire on any units that move through the opening. The Admech respond to the invaders by pushing forward, the Dominus making use of his Warlord trait to be able to open doors for the Skitarii at range, letting them begin to fill the walkways in preparation for the Orks' arrival. Right away, the big shooter of the Orks opens fire as soon as the Skitarii appear in the upper hallway. Though needing 6s to hit for Overwatch, they fail to land anything good. The Skitarii fire back with their galvanic rifles, shooting right through the Orks' armor, killing 4 Orks, and beginning to clear the hallway from the filthy Xenos invaders. The Ork immediately spends their 2 command points for insane bravery to keep the big shooter on the table from running away. Going into turn 2, the Bad Moon Orks move forward, making space for the Evil Sons boys and the Runt Herd to run as far forward as they are able, using their shootier allies as cover. As in boarding actions, keep in mind that all units do block line of sight. The orcs at the bottom make it to the door, however they opt not to open the door as their orky senses tell them that doing so would be a terrible idea, and instead they also choose to go into Overwatch. Up top, the big shooter exchanges fire once again. This time, it lands all 3 hits and deals 2 wounds. The shots land true and 2 of the Skitarii fall, though they hold firm, refusing to give up any more ground to the invading greenskins. Hearing more landing craft impact on the vessel, the Admech now push forward, setting up their firing positions. Once again, the Dominus uses his priority access to all of the doors to command the one nearest the orcs to open up, giving the Cataphrons a target, while up top a supporting squad of Skitarii bring their weapons to bear on the thinning crowd of orcs charging down the hall. As soon as the doors open, the Bad Moon Shooter boys open fire on the Cataphrons. Daka guns blazing, and the death skulls allowing for 1 reroll for each unit every time it shoots or fights. This sees 2 wounds, one of them sneaking past the armor plates of the Cataphrons. Not to be outdone, the Cataphrons return fire, first with their heavy grav shots, and then the phosphor blasters. The nearby Dominus gives them the ability to reroll 1s. The combined weight of fire is able to mow down all of the orc boys, even with the cover, and put 1 wound on the Bad Moon's knob. Up top, the combined weight of fire of the Skitarii bring down the last of the Bad Moon's clan orcs. However, the Runt Herd used his ally as a shield, and continues to charge down the hallway, looking to get into glorious melee combat. On turn 3, the War Boss and his boys from the Death Skulls arrive on the scene. All of the Evil Sons advance forward, knowing that it's go time, and the Death Skulls orcs will fill the hallways. The bellows of the War Boss fill the entire ship as he calls for the Waaaagh, setting the boys into a frenzy. Because of this, all the orcs can advance and charge this turn, as well as giving everyone +1 strength, +1 attack, and a 5-up invulnerable save. The Evil Sons orcs fire a few of their sluggers as they close the gap, but the shots bounce off armor. Not that it particularly matters at all, as the Evil Sons orcs successfully charge into close combat. Down at the bottom, the 5 Choppa Slugger boys with the power of the Waaaagh get a total of 20 attacks that hit on 3s, and then they wound on 4s. The Cataphrons have heavy armor, but the sheer number of attacks sees 6 wounds go through, killing 2 of them. Next, in the center hallway, 20 more orc attacks go into the Skitarii, who have much lighter armor. Despite that, only 4 wounds get past their armor, leaving the lone alpha alive to fight back. Finally, up top, the Runt Herd swings into the Skitarii, blocking his path with his 5 attacks. 2 failed saves later, sees the Evil Sons portion of the orcs begin to turn the tide of the battle. The Admech do fight back, however, the Cataphrons felling one of the orcs down at the bottom of the hallway, and then the Dominus jumps into the fight, felling 3 more orcs himself. In the center of the hallway, the Alpha brings down one of the orcs. Before we suddenly remember that on the Waaaagh, the orcs do have a 5-up invulnerable save, so we start rolling those, and we realize that the orc didn't really die, and he just stands back up. It's just a flesh wound. Same goes for down at the bottom of the hallway, as one of the orcs remembers that they also had that invulnerable save and hop back up again. In the morale phase, the lone alpha at the center of the room fails his check, suddenly breaking from combat and fleeing back to the main deck of the ship. With that, the orcs have suddenly swung the tide of battle in their favor as they begin to push deeper into the Admech territory. Turn 3 for the Admech, and the Dominus, realizing that things are going wrong quickly, breaks from the combat, heading straight for the activation console on the upper platform. Likewise, the lone Cataphron uses the stratagem Robotic Protocols, This allows it to fall back and still shoot this turn, but with a -1 to hit penalty, looking for a way to clear out the bottom hallway. The remaining Skitarii reposition themselves to draw a line of fire to any available targets, hoping to start pushing back the Orks before any more can hit their lines. Cataphren opens fire at the 2 Orks that smashed his unit, but without the guidance of the Dominus nearby, it's unable to land any of its shots. The Skitarii in the center fare much better. Their galvanic rifles felling 3 Orks before they can do any more damage. Sadly, up top, the fight is not nearly going so well, as all shots fail to land on the Orks in the cover of the ship walls. And then, to make matters worse, the runt herd fells another ranger in melee combat. Just a glimpse of things to come. At the top of turn 4, things are looking grim for the Admech. Orks now flood through the hallways, pushing almost up to the defender's deployment zone. The war boss, seeing the Dominus head towards the console, climbs up the side ladder to the platforms with his boys, looking to intercept and take out the enemy leader himself. Down below, the knobs do some backstabby orky shooting, taking a wound off of the Dominus as well. More orc trickery, as the shooter boys activate the stratagem Daka Storm, letting each hit count as 2 hits, giving them a total of 6, which puts 3 wounds, and then 2 failed saves leaves 1 lone Skitarii from his unit to face the oncoming horde. It should come as no surprise what happens next. The war boss charges into the Dominus, while the last of the Evil Sun's Orks charge headfirst into the Admech lines. The war boss will swing first with his 7 attacks that hit on 3s and then wounding on 2s. The Dominus activates the stratagem Omnissiah's Shield, giving him a 4+ invulnerable save, and even has to use a command point reroll as well, but he manages to only take 1 hit that deals 2 wounds, barely holding on to functionality. The rest of the Orks in combat are on the rampage. First, the last 2 Orks at the bottom are able to crush the Cataphren destroyer beneath their boots, and then the Orks in the center hallway all but crush the Rangers beneath a flurry of attacks. Up top, the Rangers are barely holding on against that single Ork, and behind him, an angry mob just waiting for their chance to open fire and take all the credits for themselves. On the Admech turn, the Dominus knows that there's no other option. Turning his back on the Ork war boss, he reaches out with his mind and focuses everything on entering the activation sequence into the control console, and he's rewarded with a hiss as the platform they are standing on begins to open up. From the lower deck repair holds rises a pair of Castellan robots, each armed with a pair of phosphor blasters and a heavy phosphor blaster. This is the last hope for the Admech to defend their ship. The automata immediately open fire on the threats. The first shots go into the Ork boys at the edge of the platform, and though the lasting effects of the Waaaagh help them to shrug off a few of the shots, 4 out of the 5 Orks still fall to the devastating firepower. The other Castellan opens fire into the Knob squad down below, looking to keep them in place, as 2 of the Ork knobs fall before they even have a chance to realize what's happening. Going to the combat phase, the Orks make short work of anything that's still engaged in a fight, but it's now up to the Dominus and the newly awakened reinforcements to hold on as long as they can. In the Orks' final turn, the knobs rush back to the war boss. That's obviously where the best scrap's gonna be. Up top, the Ork happens to find an open door, then stepping through it, they suddenly realize that they've cornered the last of the Skitarii forces. Some shooting happens, mostly into the air as the Orks taunt the last of the Skitarii Rangers before the Evil Sun's boys and the Runt Herd charge into combat, while the Death Skulls watch and sling their insults. However, up on the platform is where the real scrap is. The War Boss and the unit of knobs charge into the Dominus and the Castellan, while the remains of the unit from the boys with the knob with the claw charge into the other for revenge. The war boss and the group of knobs tear into the Castellan robot. Despite its high toughness and heavy armor, multiple power claws and big choppas are just too much for it, as the war boss kicks the smoking remains of the Castellan off the platform, turning his attention towards the Dominus. Up top, the Evil Sun's orcs finish off the last of the Skitarii, as all of the remaining orc boys begin to loot as they explore the rest of the ship. The Dominus attempts one last act of defiance, ordering the Castellan to fall back and open fire into the war boss, but to no avail. It barely leaves a scratch. The monstrous form of the Death Skull's war boss kicks the Dominus from the platform as he stares down at his fallen foe. He would use this techie boy to get back to the rest of his clan who were out there fighting and stomping on the Humies. And now that he had a ship and was good and warmed up, it was time to get back out there and have a crumpin' good time. Big shout out to everyone who has watched this video and everything else that we did during 9th edition. This has been a long road and we appreciate everyone who let us share our hobby with them. We're super excited here at Salty Island for 10th edition. We're going to be there on day 1 with new games, new opinions, lots of armies, and videos for you all to enjoy. So until then, know that we truly appreciate all of you and all of your support. See you in 10th edition. Peace out, everybody.